If you were to boil it down to one takeaway for retailers right now on AI, what would that be for you?
I think the thing that comes to mind immediately is that we still need people.
Yes.
I
Yeah.
know that's simple, but you know, still need those people with that institutional knowledge to be able to verify the outputs. AI is not perfect. I know if you've used any Claude, ChatGPT, Gemini, if you've used all of them, they make mistakes, and regardless of how much data they have, they're kind of human in a way, but they're not.
Hmm.
So I think it's been a reckoning of sorts, but I think it's been a good reckoning because it's allaying some of the fears that people have about their jobs being in jeopardy.
Welcome to Storefront Science, the show where we decode the chaos of modern store operations.
We're bypassing the buzzwords to have honest conversations with the practitioners and executives who are actually shaping the industry. All right, welcome back, everybody, to the Storefront Science Podcast. Today, we have our first returning guest, Evelyn McMullen, who was actually our first ever guest. Evelyn, thanks for joining us again today.
Thank you so much for having me back. For those that didn't see my first episode, I'm Evelyn McMullen. I'm a research director now at Nucleus Research. And we focus on return on investment analysis. So everything that we do, every technology that we write about has that financial cut through. So I think it'll be very timely for today's discussion.
Wonderful. Yeah, and I didn't even realize you had your role had changed since you were last on. So congrats on that. Exciting
Thank
stuff.
you.
All right. So yeah, we wanted to focus today's conversation a little more than last time, really around AI. Obviously, AI is, I mean, in any business world and in any personal use at this point, on everyone's mind. I think last time when we did touch on it, we really were talking about the idea of how to leverage it and needing to leverage it. And when we were at NRF following our conversation, we heard a lot about people looking to find ways to make it more practical. So at that point, it felt more like everyone was like, we need AI, we need to adopt AI. But now I think we see that retailers are really trying to figure out how to leverage it. So from your end, where do you see AI value in the retail industry right now at a high level?
At a high level, I would say where it's being applied has everything to do with how much value it drives. So two things. The first being, how mature is the process? How clean is your data? Is it set up for AI? And then on the other hand, where are your biggest headaches, which is something that we guide customers in every technology deployment to look at, not just looking at the shiniest new thing and the value potential, but something that actually has legs. But I think the only thing that hasn't changed since we last spoke is that AI is still the topic du jour. I think now we're just looking at it as AI innovation versus AI adoption to now that initial AI adoption versus what the outcomes actually are. So, you've got retailers building up their arsenal, whether they're hiring a chief AI officer, engaging legal, creating policies, and in some case pushing that adoption. There's still a lack of trust in the outcomes, especially when it comes to agentic AI, which is now kind of the main thing that everyone's talking about. And there's not much clarity when it comes to what pricing will look like. You've got subsidized token pricing, so that's going to end. They're asking themselves what they have to show for it. So while they might be getting adoption and really pushing for that, they're wondering where the outcomes are. So they're learning that, I use the example of a gotcha machine. You put a coin in. So in this case, you put a token in, you expect value out, but that's not necessarily happening. So I think the question on everyone's mind is, what is the ROAI?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And then when you look across all these retailers, where do you see the best value coming from? Like, are there areas that they should be avoiding and then areas they should actually be like dumping money into because it is returning massive ROI?
Yeah, I would say it all comes down to the manager. You think about who is the most overworked in a retail environment. It's always going to be that floor manager, whether it's spending hours upon end in the back office doing administrative tasks that they didn't necessarily become a manager to do. Things that you have a good sense of how long they're spending on those processes and knowing that their time can be better spent out on the floor or being out coaching employees.
That
Yeah,
makes a
yeah. Sorry, just I think to that. I guess from an operational standpoint, how we've seen a lot of investment in AI, but in the news the last couple of months, we've also seen some very public scaling back or failures
Right.
from AI adoption. So for people looking to scale up their AI in their stores, or potentially just re-leverage how they're using it. What do you think is the key to success, for AI adoption versus just AI innovation theater?
Yeah, I would say the most important thing is going to be not rushing it. I know obviously the pressure exists. It's real. Everyone's saying, well, your competitors are using AI and they're doing better than you, or, we replaced this entire team of people with AI and it's so great. You should be doing it too. You have to, basically. But jumping in before getting your ducks in a row, I think we've found that that's inherently risky. We're now seeing lawsuits come out of AI use. The regulation isn't quite there. So I think it's incumbent upon the customer, or, the retailer in this case, to make sure that they've got their governance structure set up. The needs have been assessed. That's the most important part. And there is a clear timeline for how they are going to scale this. I think another part of that too is making sure that all stakeholders are on board, including the end users, which are actually the most important.
Yes, 100% agree. And then I think there's a big differentiation between some of these retailers are building AI themselves versus outsourcing. Is like that constant build versus buy that you have these questions about. And
Yeah,
things that come to mind are like the Starbucks. Like they just had to pull back a bunch of AI driven technology from milk forecasting.
right.
Versus other retailers, like we have the Vallarta case study that we did, and other that are using AI and getting massive ROI because they're trusting their partners to help them with these solutions because they have it across and help to multiple people with it. So,
Yeah.
do you see more retailers moving towards this build versus buy, or is that still like depending on the retailer and depending on the size?
In the time that I've been covering workforce management in particular, that's always been a discussion. It's, do we build something internally that's more suited to our unique needs, or do we partner with a vendor and maybe have to do some configuration? I think when it comes to AI, building is a money pit unless you have that cash to burn. So if you are a smaller regional or local retailer, and you have the foundation laid by a tech vendor, you might be able to get away with customizing and doing a small build. But going back to, I'm going to be dog with a bone with this, but having your governance in check, making sure that you're able to explain the model's inner workings, the so what, making sure that you're able to handle that ongoing maintenance. It makes it more and more attractive when you think about those things to actually just partner with a vendor who's doing that legwork for you. And that's not to say that they don't have to do anything. You just set and forget it. There is going to be that element of governance and looking at things internally, but it certainly takes some of the load off. Also, I think, right now there's a large degree of iteration and trial and error that's going on right now, as to your point about Starbucks. And that can be very expensive when you're going at it alone.
Yeah, and especially with these retailers, it seems that you don't have an ROI or you don't have a proven ROI when you're building it yourself. You're
Right.
completely making up the tracks as you're going down forward, and it seems that if they want to play it safe, it seems like going after and partnering with people seems like a better case. I mean, there are situations where building yourself may be better, and you can get all the news publicity and all the fun headlines. Um,
Right.
but if you want a proven ROI, like Nucleus is able to offer and show you on all the stuff you guys do, and share with companies, partnering, I think is one of the smarter moves, especially for faster
Yeah.
ROI.
Yeah. And I'd say that vendors are kind of in that iteration stage too. They're trying to figure out what their customers need and what is going to drive those outcomes. But I'd say, when it comes to when do you build, answering that question, it would probably be for a very unique, specific edge case, or maybe something more experimental.
I think I see a lot of people doing builds for customer facing stuff, whether that be
Yeah.
an internal like cool chat bot that helps them buy, or like things that are can scan a school shopping list and then it puts it in your shopping cart, things like that. I think, but
Yeah, and they're lower risk too. And I think going back to the point about having the human in the loop, that's so important because you need to have a way to circumvent the tech regardless. As an example, you go to the airport, you see those just walk out stores. There's always a person there because it's inevitable that someone's going to try to get in and they don't know how to use it, or they don't know what they're supposed to be doing. So it's kind of a real life example of that.
Yeah, I would say, uh, uh, transitioning over to something you had said in a previous discussion with us about human and elite operations. And I think, um, the other side of AI is there's a lot of anxiety around jobs being replaced.
Yeah.
And what does that human market look like on the other side? And I think some of the pitfalls, we were just discussing, comes back to the idea of like AI running wild, right? Or an AI goes unchecked and is just implemented and expected to deliver results as opposed to being leveraged in the right way. So what do you see in terms of like the future of the the interaction? I think this goes to also the point you brought up about, having your ducks in a row. So how do you think, what does that workflow look like going forward for retailers?
Yeah, it's an interesting question because obviously AI has data and it's able to synthesize that data, and that's, the inherent value of it. But I think what it's missing is that lived experience that a manager or an employee may have that creates that full picture of institutional knowledge that AI just truly doesn't have. So you're always going to have someone to audit what the AI is doing. Now, what that looks like from a employee and kind of end user perspective, it kind of remains to be seen. I mean, realistically, I don't know that stores will need as many people, but you're always going to need people to be able to validate the output.
Yeah. And are there any specific functions that you see that AI should, will really start to, what's the term I'm looking for? Handle or manage within the store infrastructure?
Yeah, I think, if we think about it, retailers and any other organization that has a frontline heavy workforce, they're kind of the earliest adopters of AI, if you think about it, because they're using machine learning and deep learning in their forecasting. So layering, an LLM on top of that is actually a nice way to incorporate AI because, it's a process that's more mature. So I'd say demand forecasting and then scheduling, just things that, managers don't want to do. We've never met a manager who's really excited to go build a schedule. They know they're going to have to go back and change it a million times. And that's all time that could be spent out on the floor, to my earlier point, coaching the employees, doing better things.
Especially when something like a schedule can be so nitpicky with compliance laws and people's personal preferences. You bring in so many different touch points of, hey, how many people I need on this day, and then planning things out and all these different pieces of the puzzle. That takes a one human component so much time versus the human component knows whether it's right or wrong and can help tweak it once it's built. But that building phase probably takes a lot longer. But for an AI, can really speed to action.
Yeah, absolutely. And then an example I've seen outside of workforce is, using AI to be able to flag returns fraud. And that's kind of an interesting piece too, because now we're seeing AI be used, I guess, not for evil, but, for things that maybe aren't as good. And how do we then use AI to counteract that?
That makes a lot of sense. One theme that's can come up repeatedly today is like measurable business value. And this feels like the perfect transition into like something that Nucleus Research recently recognized for, and that's the Vallarta supermarket. As the top 10 ROI stories globally. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I would say that Vallarta, their story is really a perfect example of unification done right and where it makes sense. So when you look at the store environment, I know we talked about this in the last episode, but so much of a store is interdependent when you're thinking about, the forecast and everything that goes on between, the bakery and the meat counter, and if they have an in-store cafeteria, things like that. It really presents a risk for disruption, and it makes a lot of these kinds of technology deployments seem like they're not worth it. But the way that they thoughtfully, okay, first assess their needs, prioritize where their biggest headaches were. So they started in a specific department when they were rolling out the fresh operations management, but phasing it out in a way that minimized that disruption. And that's what ultimately made that deployment so successful.
And then they ranked number 2 overall through you guys' entire
They did,
or
yes.
stories. That's incredible. What was the other pieces of those? What other stories from there that's really stood out to you as being high ROI drivers?
Yeah, I would say, first of all, if you want to check out the ROI Award winners from this year, you can go to roiawards.com, and then they'll all be listed there. You can kind of get a bottom line summary of each of the stories. The interesting thing, and I think it's very, it just kind of shows where we are today in AI. A lot of these cases did not necessarily focus on AI, but I think what stood out to me is that they've kind of set the stage for AI, because I saw a lot of stories around unification of fragmented environments. And I think that's really the first step. And it's something that, people don't want to tackle, but it is necessary, because otherwise you're layering AI on top of something and it's a bolted on tool of which you already have so many. And then it's giving you the wrong answers and you're making decisions based on that. And it's just a nightmare.
100% agree. I mean, even building my own stuff, that's the first thing I did was I stopped using a collateral of AIs and was like, hey, here's my main one. I unified all my prompts, my requests, and it learns so much faster. And I think when you do that at scale for a large retailer, the
Hmm.
benefits that you're going to get from that once you start applying it and layering it in makes incredible. So the
Yeah.
unification is definitely understandable. It's like that's the story for this year, and then next year we'll add in a bunch more benefits of what they do with that once they unify everything.
Yes, definitely. And it's interesting just thinking about the AI readiness of it all. I think part of the problem too is that AI has been marketed as being so turnkey, when in reality, I think now organizations are grappling with the fact that there's a lot of legwork that they have to do to be ready for it to work correctly, for it to deliver on those outcomes that they want.
That makes a lot of sense. Do you see the companies being AI ready based on their size, like larger ones being harder to be AI ready versus smaller ones? Um,
Yeah, it's interesting because on both sides, you have your large enterprises, obviously a little bit more complexity there, more people to get on board, but also more resources. Where on the small business side, you have fewer resources, but you are also more nimble.
yeah,
So I'd say it kind of equalizes the playing field a little bit. I don't think that anyone should be shut out of being able to use AI.
that makes sense. Any final questions, Ryan, before we close up for today?
Yeah, so I think I probably know the answer given the themes here, but if you were to boil it down to one main, we've talked a lot about different angles of the AI discussion, but if you were to boil it down to one takeaway for retailers right now on AI, what would that be for you?
I think the thing that comes to mind immediately is that we still need people.
Yes.
I
Yeah.
know that's simple, but you know, still need those people with that institutional knowledge to be able to verify the outputs. AI is not perfect. I know if you've used any Claude, ChatGPT, Gemini, if you've used all of them, they make mistakes, and regardless of how much data they have, they're kind of human in a way, but they're not.
Hmm.
So I think it's been a reckoning of sorts, but I think it's been a good reckoning because it's allaying some of the fears that people have about their jobs being in jeopardy.
Yeah, I
That makes
think when you talk about human in the lead, another way I've heard it phrased, I was listening to a marketing podcast a couple months ago, and then a CMO was on and saying that in the world of AI, our job becomes to be tastemakers,
Yeah.
and having that ability to QA stuff quickly and efficiently. And then to Ben's point earlier, um, you know, to half of what AI leverages is the data you input. So whether you're a human using one of those tools, or an enterprise using an enterprise solution, um, you and your human input data is going to drive the outcomes that you get. So
Yeah. That's
I
a
think a
really
lot
great.
of people in the audience will be very excited to hear your takeaway that humans are not being replaced. I think we all feel better knowing that. But
what.
all right. Sorry, go Ben.
Yeah, the final thing I was thinking is I don't know if someone said this one day or something, but the pen is only as mighty as the one holding it. So AI is only as good as the person using it or
Yeah.
the company using it. And so there is you can't just slap AI on it and make it top notch. It has to be used by the right people in the right places.
Yep. Absolutely. Like any tool, right? And if you set AI free on its own, I think I'd seen some article where it was starting to cannibalize itself, which is not lovely to say, but doesn't
Or,
sound great.
or spend your entire year's worth of tokens in 12 seconds.
Oh, well, exactly. Yep.
So guardrails.
Guardrails. That'll be my other point to leave with everyone. Guardrails, guardrails, guardrails.
Awesome. All right. Well, appreciate having you back on. Look forward to having you on again someday as the first three-time guest. But today,
Can't
first
wait.
2-time guest. Appreciate it, and appreciate all the work you're doing in the market.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Evelyn.
Bye.